Hello and welcome. Another episode of Conversational Artificial Intelligence. Today we have a very special guest, Fred Haubensak, who has been a technologist in Silicon Valley, is a former MIT PhD, and has started a number of startups here in Silicon Valley. What we're going to talk today, it's something very interesting. It's the next dimension of applying machine learning to our lives. And I let him talk about this. Before we go any further, if you're new to the channel, it is an honor and privilege to have you here. If you're coming back, thank you so much. We really appreciated your time. So now, why is what we're going to talk about important? Because we're going to the realm of seeing how machine learning is applied for us to improve our lives from a number of perspectives. And now let me turn the attention to Fred and ask a simple question. Hi, Fred, how are you today?
Doing great, Paolo. Great to meet you, and welcome to everybody on the channel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. And so, Fred, before we go into the machine learning, the technology, and this very interesting technology that your startup is bringing to the market, before any of that, and let's suppose that today I show your 18 years old mates when you were in high school, and they show up in your room, and you had to tell them, what did you do in the last 25 years or whatever. So what would you tell them?
That's a great question. I would say, in my honest heart of hearts, I would say I learned to be very proud of the fact that I'm a data geek. And I've learned that about myself. And along the way, I've used that passion for science and data to, build a career in analytics. And then starting in the last 5 to 10 years to really try to build products around how people can improve their lives. And basically I've become passionate about this idea of data science and science in general. So that's kind of the heart of hearts answer I would give.
So, and one of the things that I really, I enjoyed to when I first met you, and then I looked into your LinkedIn, because now today LinkedIn is our gateway to meeting people, is that actually you started as a mechanical engineer, I think, out of MIT. And you came out here to the Valley, presumably working somehow in that field. And today you work into the most advanced software. I think this is very valuable to tell our audience and people that are in other countries how that happened and how that was even possible. Because for a lot of people, they get into a career in life and then they never change. They believe it's not possible. How is that possible?
It's a great question, and I'm very passionate about this topic, actually. I did start off in mechanical engineering. Actually, my degree was in simulations in large part of material character microstructure, and how does that influence mechanical behavior. So I'd spent a lot of time in the 90s on Spark workstations running in Fortran, and then I evolved into, and I took that, that experience, and I evolved into a data science career at Intel. That was something that is something I believe is available to many people nowadays. If you have a passion for data, it really comes from, and that transition into a data scientist for me was really based on experience. I didn't have any traditional classes in data science, but I came out of a good engineering program, and I learned the basics, and then I really learned at Intel in an industrial setting, in the manufacturing world, actually, in the semiconductor manufacturing world, where there's just big data was very prevalent back in the 90s before that was even a term. So I guess I got my feet wet into doing analytics, understanding how to take raw data and make a message out of it. And there's something beautiful about that, to be able to say, here's what this is telling you, and you need to do this thing. So I learned that. I kind of got a passion. I understood that was something that I was good at, and I liked it. So after Intel, I decided I wanted to do more startups, and I I just kind of landed in a place where I needed to understand how to maybe do some modeling. And I can tell you, Paolo, how I spent my first year out of Intel. It was really around building a product, but really studying and reading, even on Wikipedia. What is it? What is machine learning? What is AI? And I just on the train riding to San Francisco, I just pick up my phone and start reading Wikipedia or reading a paper, just out of curiosity and passion for that. And there's so much available now, online, open source. You can just Google anything nowadays, and you can really drill down until you've kind of reached your limit of your interest. So passion, and I luckily had the opportunity to have time after my Intel career to have a little bit of free time, a few months, maybe up to about 6 months, where I was building a new company, but had a lot of time to learn. And I just became passionate about learning. What does it mean to have machine learning? What does that mean? What are these techniques? And then I took an Andrew Ng class, which I highly recommend on Coursera. And that just solidified for me that this was something I was going to do. And I've just been doing it ever since, the last 3 or 4 years. That's
actually, I think, very illustrative for a lot of people, especially those who, don't live in a tech hub as we do, and they're exposed to less opportunities. And today you are the CTO of a company by the name of Trybe. Before we go into that, I have still another funny question for you. If you were to reintroduce yourself to your wife today, well, how would you do that?
These are hard questions for me, because but to be self-reflective, and to share with my wife Naomi who I am today. If she didn't know anything about me, I'd say, again, what I said a little bit earlier, to some extent, I don't have any apologies. I'm a data nerd. I'm a nerd, and I love science. I love data. I love building things out of data and science. Those are my passions, and I do that every day. And I just get a kick out of it. So that's essentially what it is in a nutshell. And I just happen to be working at a company called Trybe today, which lets me do all the things I want to do and just a few things I don't want to do.
But that's, I think, I haven't yet found a job where, you do only things that you want to do, including when you work for yourself. Actually, when you work for yourself, you have only yourself to blame. Yes. So what does Trybe do? What do you think is that it brings to the world?
Yeah, what I think Trybe is a great question. It's trying to build a value for an unmet need today, in today's world, where, especially today, where you have millennials who are coming up into the workforce or becoming managers in a workforce where productivity is paramount. And what do companies do now? They give you every tool you can to work 7/24, and people feel that pressure. What Trybe is doing is trying to enable leaders in small to medium-sized companies, or really anywhere, to become better leaders of teams. So we think of ourselves as having a heritage of team science, and I'll tell you more about team science if you're interested. But we did a little bit of research with Stanford and MIT's entrepreneurial competitions, and we discovered some real basic elements of what make teams successful. And there's a whole literature out there. We just happen to reproduce some of it ourselves and learn some new things. In that practice, an example of one of the things that we learn, we talk to people about, and is something called psychological safety on a team. And that's just a good example that people understand. And we try to point leaders in the direction of building that psychological safety amongst team members. And if we're good at what we do, we'll tell them how to do it. It's really helping, especially young in career new managers, become leaders in teams that are healthy and happy. And that's essentially what we're trying to do.
So it is definitely very interesting, and also, if you like, a new angle of looking at technology, because you're trying to impact really kind of the perceptual and behavioral sphere of human beings. But I'd love to ask somewhat a tough question. Belief is the factor that would make people, a manager, interested in this. Why should they be motivated in getting on board with the software, is analyzing them, is giving them feedback. Why do you think they would go on board?
Yeah, this is a central question for us as a company, to understand how to build a product that has promise for something that we term internally, muscle building activities. You can get better at this thing over here if you do this thing. Typically, what the products that find better engagement, high engagement, are products that solve things that people have hair on fire. They don't know how to do a certain thing, or they can't do a certain thing, and this product will solve it. We are a little bit on the softer side of value proposition. So, but in essence, the answer to your question is we don't go directly B to C to the leader. We go, first of all, we've tried two different approaches. One of them is working better than the other right now, but we still have a B2B, where we engage the chief HR folks in a company and say, this is the kind of promise we have. And by the way, we can give you aggregated data for across your leaders or your teams or your divisions to understand how you can do your job better. But if it comes top down with a well established champion within an organization that says, this is something we're all going to do together. We're going to do it for a period of time, 21 days, and here's a tool to do it. Give it a shot. It's going to be a little bit difficult in the beginning, and once you do it a few times, it'll become more obvious and easy, and then you'll learn. That is one approach. The other one is actually engaging coaching professionals. So executive coaches, for example, who are folks who do deal one-on-one typically with a CEO or another type of team leader. And there you have that additional kind of human who is holding your client, the client accountable, essentially, providing that kind of encouragement as a coach would do. So we've found that if you have either the enterprise top down with a well-established program, or again, a coach to kind of lead you through this process of habit building, those are becoming obvious requirements for our business model.
So can we say that basically there are two stakeholders here, the HR departments and the manager?
Yes.
The benefit to the HR department is better managers, let's say that's a promise, plus a platform to monitor what's going on and how they can design their HR policies to improve things within the organization.
Yes.
And definitely that has a lot of value in large companies. Because large companies, even a VP level is still an employee. But large companies have lots of these intricacies around, HR policies. It's more like it's pretty much like a politics, like being in a parliament and lots of stakeholders.
It's beyond that to the extent of large companies know this. It's all kind of common sense that leaders and managers of teams are typically the reason why employees leave. Right. So from a business bottom line perspective, recruitment and retention is a big, expensive process. And if you can turn your leaders who are in effect turning their employees off into people who are able to retain and encourage them and get them motivated, that you have that in your control if you can just give those particular, maybe young in career leaders who don't understand the basics or they're not able to see themselves in the mirror necessarily. We view ourselves a little bit about like that. Here's a little bit about you, right? That you can really transform a company into being much happier and more productive.
I think it clarifies for our audience what the benefit is. But that's all. There's gonna be managers that are interested to self-development. This is an assistant as much as the Fitbit or all the new assistants that are coming up to the market in terms of, like fitness and so on. It's just an assistant that is looking at another dimension of the human life, and it's the relationship with others in the workplace, basically. It's a pretty important element, especially in a place like Silicon Valley or the United States in general, where you have different ethnicities, different nationalities. It's very, very, very easy to generate some kind of misunderstanding or just not using the right tone of voice, not using the right, gesture. People that have different basic way of communicating, all of that can create some miscommunication. And then from miscommunication, all the rest happens. So if you can avoid the miscommunication, you can, cut any problem at the very beginning. To me, it seems a very important value proposition. Before we move on, looking into the machine learning, I'd just like to some of our viewers are also people that are interested in building products, launching products. Maybe some of them are dreaming to start their startups and so on. And so I think it's a very important point. How is your company going about, marketing this idea without going into the details? But how is the company go about marketing this thing that is a new thing? It's new to the world. It didn't exist yesterday. It exists today, and you have to explain people this is our thing. What is the company doing to market this?
Yeah, I think the thing that resonates with our current market audience, which again are kind of chiefs of HR or enlightened CEOs, et cetera, in companies, leaders in companies, or these executive coach market. What resonates with them is that they can get data about their team or their behavior. Typically, how an executive coach thinks about their business is they will meet with their executive or team, maybe in a company, give them, some feedback or ideas to work on things, maybe habit building things, use more questions in a meeting, for example, or maybe ask, have some humor in your meeting or some things that are kind of basic that we think about. And they understand that if between the sessions, between the times that they talk to their clients, if they can have their client doing some activity like these reflections I was mentioning, and they can get feedback on if their client is doing those activities, and maybe even getting some information from those activities that in real time, that coach can really be scaling their business without doing anything. They can sit at their, in their office and looking at a report at the end of the week or maybe on a daily basis and see how their CEO is doing. Are they doing the habit building formation? That's foundational. A typical executive coach may have literally less than a dozen clients, typically half a dozen. If they could scale that by 10x by making their time more valuable instead of traveling to various places and so forth, you can imagine that really resonates with them. So again, data that kind of supports and partners with their business model. Getting real data is something that is extremely valuable, because I can state why that is. I think most people in the Valley anyway understand if you have a piece of data, it just goes so far to convince someone, especially someone that's data savvy, that what they're saying is true. You may not be doing these things, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, and here's the data. You need to do this other thing. So again, scaling up their businesses because we're actually letting them be engaged with their clients between their personal interactions is a big proposition for this market.
I think it covers a lot of the aspects that introduce the startup and what where is it at and what type of product and benefits it's bringing to the market. And I like now to move a little bit more, like in your domain, more in the technology, but unfortunately, being a product manager, I had to be bad again and ask you this. What is the high-level product experience that the manager is going to go through?
Let me talk about the second use case, because we have essentially a reflection activity. We want to have managers build their habits that they're aware of, that become clear to them from their coach or from our other models I'm going to tell you about right now. That's one thing. A daily reflection for 2 minutes. That's a good thing to do. We support that in our app, and that's really critical. The second part is practice. You have to build your habits, think about them, and then practice them in a real world setting. That use case where the same app is used in the same way, almost identically, but it happens in a meeting where, let's say, your leader's running their staff meeting for the week, or some kind of planning meeting. It doesn't really matter what kind of meeting it is. So they turn it on. The app records the audio. We do a transcription. We can get diarization or who is speaking at any given time. And anyway, all that information gets boiled down into a couple of different things I can talk about. One is how to feedback the right metrics to the leader. For example, a good metric is how much time did you speak versus the rest of the team. That's a critical metric that people understand, and they kind of get what they should do about it. And if another person on the team is maybe dominating the airtime, or another person on the team is never speaking, we can also give that perspective, that information. Those are metrics that no human is ever going to generate from a stopwatch or whatever. So we give that kind of information back, and that's just by itself a value proposition. But at a higher level, like I was telling you before, we build models around psychological safety. So I'll paint a simple cartoon for you and know that there are caveats and exceptions and things we're still building. But essentially, when we say let's help the team leader understand psychological safety, it's about saying, okay, you as a team, you have essentially a grade. We can grade you on this. Essentially, what does that mean? Through the various metrics that we collect, talk time. And I'm not going to mention all the metrics, and this is proprietary, but things like use of questions, certain types of questions. And another interesting thing that we're going to be publishing this in the next few months, but the interaction between people. Okay, if I'm speaking to Paolo, and then Paolo speaks to Sam, and Sam speaks to John, and John speaks to Fred, that's a pattern of interaction. If Paolo and Fred are just going back and forth all the time, that's telling you something about the team culture. If Paolo never responds to Fred, because in our interactions, if I say something to you, you never respond back to me, that's telling you something about your attitude about me. If I am a leader and I'm never responding to Paolo, and I'm only responding to the other folks, that's telling me that my consensus building skills may not be the best they can be. I'm a good consensus builder, someone who's probing everybody in the team. And those are metrics that we also create to say your consensus building is this number, your influence skills are this number. And those are also features that we build into our model for psychological safety. So again, if the leader gets let's say a great grade on psychological safety, we'll say good job, and maybe there's some other things we can do. If they don't, we have a way to break it down into what we have now is 18 subcategories. Think of it as a sentiment analysis engine for team science. We might say your team could do better on managing conflict. That comes about because of certain of these features that we measure in the audio and in the pattern of interaction that is telling the leader something. And of course, then the next thing that follows from that is some recommended content. Could be a few things that you provide to the leader that says, hey, maybe your managing conflict skills could be improved. Here's some ways to think about this. And next week you do your practice session, try this thing, and maybe you'll get better. That's the idea.
All of this is very interesting. As we move into the technology, and sounds like complex, so we're trying to simplify. I have one simple question. How do you get all this information? So what are the sensors that give you all this information? The voice, the interaction between people, if people are talking or not talking. What is the entry point for this information to go from the real world into becoming data?
We get information from the audio recording, so we transcribe that. That's a critical part of it. The other pieces that are possible also are we also have a feature that we are using that allows a team to give a quick survey response at the end of the meeting. So 4 questions, things like, was this meeting clear? Was this an effective meeting? Things of that nature. A quick feedback on 4 topics. They're usually 0 to 3 or something like that. And we're playing around with these details. But essentially, it's a way for us to kind of get a self-assessed feedback from the team members on how this particular session went. So that's essentially the data, audio, the transcription of the audio, and some feedback from the pulse check. We call it the pulse check. And from that, then we build either these kind of aggregated metrics, as I was talking about, like talk time or even consensus building skills. Those are in themselves interesting and useful to give to leaders, or you can build this more higher level model, which is in some ways kind of a black box, but we trained it on data, and it is what it is. And based upon that, you can give a score or a ranking, and tell the leader, hey, the metric that our model is telling you that you need to work on most is this one, psychological safety, or it could be another one. And then they have some content to follow up on.
How is machine learning playing a role here? Like maybe if you can identify the biggest boxes that play a role.
Yeah,
that would be very interesting.
Let me give you a bit of a bigger picture, at least to start with. A true AI company is really the heart and soul of it is I'll say the obvious thing, the data. But not only that, but the labels for the data. If you really want to be an AI company, you have to have some training data. So what we do is we have used some data we collected again in our research at Stanford and MIT, where let me just give you the quick version of that. We interviewed couple dozen teams before they were graded by a VC panel. So you have like teams of students in graduate school or an undergraduate. They're kind of typically a blend. They form a business. This is a typical thing that folks do, a little startup, and then they enter this competition and they get graded. Well, we interviewed these teams before they got graded, pass, fail, or moving into the finals. And then we were able to use that training set to build our first versions of these models. So we had a human coach rate the teams on these 18 sub-scores of team science. And based upon that model, we can take any team and we can just run that model and that's the predictor. So that's essentially what it is. We're just, building a model upon training data that we collected in a research setting. Now at Trybe, we're actually collecting a second version of a higher volume version of this training data set, as I was alluding to now. We have yet to build models based upon that because our training data set's still growing, but that's the next version.
What expertise are necessary to build around this type of technology? Sounds like natural language processing, it sounds like speech to text, but then there is something more on top of it, because there is this ability to go from the text into creating a dashboard. That's kind of the secret sauce.
Yes.
So what type of people do you need to do this?
That's a great question. I have to say, I think it's really a blend of folks who have a real instinct and experience with product building. And I think this is something that you would identify with, Paolo. It's an instinct around what are people going to find valuable, and also not create a lot of overhead to barrier to get that information. So the app has got to be a well-designed, instrument, and it's got to be intuitive and delightful. All that said, I can't overestimate or over indicate that importance of that. Oftentimes and I think a lot of technologists in the area tend to think, oh, we can do this thing, let's do this thing, right? And there's tons of examples of this, right? I'll give you one example, and we want to avoid this, but essentially it's the idea of, let's build a reinforcement model, this deep learning model on how to build, a system that can play Go or Dota, right? That's an extreme example of a raw technology exhibition. It doesn't have a product, but it's coming out of a technologist's idea of what is cool to build, right? We need to avoid that. What we need to do is pay attention to what our market wants, and listen and understand. And to put where the rubber hits the road, for example, is around metric trustworthiness. Let's just use an example. If I tell you, Paolo, that you only spoke 10% of the time in a meeting, and you know that you spoke half the time, you're not going to trust my metric. My metrics have to have a degree of accuracy and trustworthiness. That seems obvious, but that goes a long way to building trust with your clients, and you've got to establish that. As a data scientist, you've got to have a perspective that when I'm building, I have to be able to communicate the error bars and the other issues around the accuracy and trustworthiness of my metrics to my product chief or my customer. If I don't have a sense for that, and I can't talk about that, then you're going to run into a lot of expensive problems.
That's very interesting, very important, and I want to say a few things. First, the three topics that Fred has covered, we have already taught several times in various videos. So first thing is how a manager doesn't have to fall into the trap of building or lead engineering, building the farthermost technology stuff, because you have to be focused on the project and on the business drivers of it. The second thing that we also discussed in other videos is basically the need for explainability. Sometimes there are applications in B2B where explainability is everything. You can have the best technology of the world, but people are not going to adopt it if they cannot understand how the machine made the decision, because they are doing something critical. The third thing is creating trust. It's not enough to say we have this beautiful algorithm. If human beings not collaborating, and in order to collaborate, they're not going to adopt. So these are the real life, among the real life challenges that technologists in this area face every day. And Fred, I'll keep you here for like days and asking you questions. I know that our time is limited. I would like just for a second to look into another aspect of this. A lot of startups, typically, we know, for example, when in large companies, people acquire the startup, you know that they have, at the beginning, they have, build the prototype and they haven't thought about scalability and so on. And then they have pushed the prototype till a certain point. And then there's going to be a point in the future where things are going to fall apart because it cannot handle the mass of data or the complication or the variability of data. Usually it's more a scalability question. So how do you go as CTO about thinking of this system and the various stages of growth of the company?
Yeah, the first thing you do is you hire a great chief of engineering. And so our chief of engineering, Faisal Mohammed, is amazing. I trust him, and we've built some great infrastructure on AWS. I'll put a plug in there. So I don't have any huge heartburn. I don't wake up in the middle of the night or thinking about breaking the infrastructure yet. But we talk about that stuff periodically. What I'm more concerned about is making sure that as we unfold our product roadmap, that all along the way we've made sure that the data and the labels that are going to be collected are scaling with our customers, so that we can minimize the time between when a customer onboards and when we can actually provide them with something that's a little bit unique for them. Meaning we can collect data all day long and give someone else the results of the model. But the beauty of deep learning ultimately is that you can customize your recommendation for your customer. So as people start to use their system, we want to think, how do we minimize the time between when they onboard and when they can actually get meaningful, somewhat individualized responses to their particular situation? And I could elaborate more on that, but that's the beauty of deep learning. But the techniques aren't good. The machine learning techniques are not going to limit that. Our infrastructure is not going to limit me. It's, did we plan ahead to make sure that our data sources, including the labels, are rich and reliable and going to provide the basis for good models? That's my big worry.
I'm sure that here there is lots more to dig in, and for time reasons we cannot do it. But one thing that I like to ask as a final thing is, where do you think this sector is evolving, and where do you think you need more machine learning evolution to satisfy some market needs that you see in the marketplace?
It's a great strategic question. It's a bit fuzzy. There are a lot of variables. I think at the vanguard of this area of extracting information from audio data is companies, I won't mention their names, but they support sales teams, and the ability to listen to a sales call and know when to interject or give a salesperson a piece of information, or maybe after the fact. There's a lot of progress being made in those user experiences, and we tend to look at those examples and try to follow their trailblazing in some areas and trailblaze on our own. So it's just a wild west right now, kind of in many ways, in terms of user experience and what people will adopt. We're finding that is our main challenge is the product market fit. So I think in the future, really what's going to happen is the trends I see that are significant is the use of audio data is going to become better and better. We're really on the cusp. It's moving so quickly. The transcription accuracy, the thing that's even more difficult in the industry now is good diarization, knowing who's speaking when. That's critical for us. We do that in our own particular proprietary way. That's going to improve. So there's other technological trends, but also these millennial managers who are coming into the workforce are much more open to having their information recorded and getting Fitbit-like information back. They understand that much more. So we're on the cusp of that. That's our market now. And as that unfolds, it's going to become more widely, those views will become more widely held. So I think the market is ripe now for providing kind of high level, platform that gives high-level messages either to the end customer or to the coach to help build habits, and also just reinforcing habit building formation through fairly simple technology. At least the habit building part. It's not super high tech right now, but I think it's more a challenge of, are folks going to adopt having an email or a text sent to them at a particular day of the week after they've done certain things to help build their habits. That aspect of it is, I think, a little less around technology and more around just comfort level and its market product fit. But the machine learning pieces of it and the higher end is where the real opportunity lies, I believe. And it's, again, limited more by, as I was saying, having a good strategy around data and labeling the data, and then also having the audio transcription more accurate and the diarization more accurate. Those are the trends we're counting on that are going to really make our business model more effective in the future.
So Fred, as I said, there would be another 200 questions here to ask, but our time is limited. So we wanted to, definitely thank you for taking your time and coming here, Conversation Artificial Intelligence. We want to thank all our viewers. If you have questions specific for Fred or for me about this topic, please comment below. And if you want to, suggest other topics or similar topics, please comment below. If you want to see more of this content, just subscribe to the channel. We would be honored to bring you more content. And for the time being, Fred, has been a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Take care.